At brunch, my daughter-in-law laughed. "You're not part of this family anymore." I just nodded. That afternoon, I removed her name from the deed. The Sunday brunch was supposed to be a celebration, my son Michael's promotion. The table at Bellini's was elegantly set with fine china and crystal glasses that caught the late morning sunlight. Everyone was dressed in their Sunday best. My grandson Ethan, just 7, was even wearing a little bow tie that made my heart melt. I'd arrived early, as I always did. Punctuality was something Frank, my late husband, had instilled in me. I'd chosen a corner table with a view of the garden, ordered a bottle of champagne for the toast, and even brought a small gift for Michael, a vintage watch that had belonged to his father. When they arrived, Michael, his wife Rebecca, and Ethan, I stood to greet them, arms outstretched for hugs that never fully materialized. Rebecca air-kissed somewhere near my cheek while Michael gave me a distracted pat on the shoulder. Only Ethan hugged me properly, wrapping his little arms around my waist before Rebecca pulled him away. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. "Mom, you didn't need to get here so early," Michael said, checking his phone before sitting down. "I wanted everything to be perfect for your celebration," I replied, trying to keep my voice light. Rebecca rolled her eyes so subtly that someone who hadn't been studying her expressions for 8 years might have missed it. "Always the perfectionist. Aren't you, Eleanor?" I smiled politely, pushing down the familiar sting. Rebecca had never called me Mom, or even Mrs. Harrison, just Eleanor, as if we were distant acquaintances. The waiter came to take our orders. I'd been looking forward to their eggs Benedict for days, but suddenly found myself without appetite. I ordered a simple fruit plate instead. "So, Michael," I said once the waiter had left, "tell me more about this promotion. Vice President of Operations sounds very important." Michael launched into an explanation that was clearly rehearsed, probably from telling the story multiple times to people whose opinions he valued more than mine. I nodded along, trying to show genuine interest, despite the technical jargon he didn't bother to simplify for me. "We should toast," I said when he finished, reaching for the champagne. Rebecca stopped me with a perfectly manicured hand. "Oh, we don't drink champagne anymore. Too many carbs. We're doing the keto thing now." I didn't know." I withdrew my hand, feeling foolish. "When did that start?" "About 3 months ago," Michael said, looking at me like I should have somehow known this information I'd never been told. "We told everyone at Easter," Rebecca added. "Oh, wait, you weren't there. I wasn't invited," I corrected gently. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. I had been waiting for an Easter invitation that never came, only to see photos on Facebook later. Michael, Rebecca, Ethan, and Rebecca's parents all smiling around a table laden with food. "Well, you were probably busy anyway," Rebecca said, waving her hand dismissively. The waiter returned with our food, temporarily saving me from having to respond. As we ate, the conversation drifted to topics that excluded me. People from their social circle I'd never met. Events I hadn't been invited to. Inside jokes I didn't understand. I focused on my grandson instead. "How's school going, Ethan?" "Still." "Enjoying your science class?" Before Ethan could answer, Rebecca cut in. "He's not into science anymore. He's taking piano lessons now, aren't you, sweetie?" "Piano?" I echoed, surprised. "I didn't know you were interested in music, Ethan." "Mom's making me," Ethan mumbled, pushing his food around his plate. "It's good for his cognitive development," Rebecca stated firmly. "My mother played piano, you know." I nodded, swallowing another small bite of fruit that tasted like nothing. Of course Rebecca's mother played piano. Rebecca's mother was apparently perfect in every way, unlike me, whose many deficiencies as a grandmother were frequently, if subtly, highlighted. "Maybe Grandma could come to my recital," Ethan suggested, looking up hopefully. I smiled at him, warmth spreading through my chest at the invitation. Rebecca's laugh cut through the moment like a knife. "Oh, honey, Grandma's not really part of this family anymore. She's too busy with her own life." The words hit me like a physical blow. My hand froze midway to my water glass. I looked at Michael, waiting for him to contradict his wife, to defend me, to say anything at all. Instead, he chuckled and reached for his coffee. "Yeah, Mom's got her garden club and her book club. Probably doesn't have time for piano recitals." They both laughed as if they'd shared some harmless joke, as if they hadn't just casually excised me from my own family. I looked at Ethan, whose small face had fallen, then at Rebecca, who was cutting her avocado toast into precise triangles, a self-satisfied smile playing at her lips. Finally, at my son, my only child, the boy I'd raised alone after Frank died when Michael was just 10. The boy I'd worked 2 jobs to put through college, the young man whose down payment I'd helped with, the son who was now laughing along, with the woman who had just declared me an outsider. I just nodded. What else could I do? Make a scene? Cry? Demand an apology? None of those options would change the truth that had been laid bare. In their minds, I was already gone. The rest of brunch passed in a blur. I smiled when appropriate, asked the right questions, and even paid the bill when it came, waving away Michael's half-hearted attempt to reach for it. "It's your celebration," I insisted. "Please let me." When we parted outside the restaurant, Rebecca gave me another air kiss. Michael checked his watch and mumbled something about a meeting. "Canseo." "I have a real hug, Grandma," Ethan asked, breaking away from his mother's grasp. I knelt down and held him close, breathing in the scent of his hair, trying to memorize the feeling of his small body against mine. "I love you, Ethan," I whispered. "Love you too," he whispered, back before Rebecca pulled him away. I watched them walk to their car, a heaviness settling in my chest that had nothing to do with the food I'd barely touched. Only when they'd driven away did I allow my smile to falter, my shoulders to sag. The drive home was silent. No radio, no phone calls. Just me and the echo of Rebecca's words. "You're not really part of this family anymore." My house, the same, one where I'd raised Michael, where Frank and I had built our life together, felt emptier than usual when I returned. I moved through the familiar rooms like a ghost, touching photographs, straightening cushions, trying to find my footing in a world that had suddenly shifted beneath me. In my home office, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a folder labeled Property Documents. Inside was the deed to Michael and Rebecca's house, the house I had helped them buy 5 years ago, insisting that my name be added to avoid gift taxes. At the time, it had seemed like a practical solution. Now, it felt like the only card I had left to play. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "James Harrison Law Office," a cheerful voice answered. "This is Eleanor Harrison," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I'd like to speak with my brother-in-law, please." As I waited to be connected, I looked at a photo on my desk. Michael as a baby, cradled in my arms, Frank's hand on my shoulder. We had been a family once, a real family. "Eleanor?" James's familiar voice came through the line. "This is a surprise. Everything okay?" I took a deep breath, my fingers tracing the edges of the deed in front of me. "Actually, James, I need to make some changes to a property deed. How soon can I come in?" James's office hadn't changed in years. The same oak desk, leather-bound, books, and a portrait of Frank on the wall. The brothers had looked so alike, both with that strong jaw and kind eyes. "This is quite a step, Eleanor," James said, reviewing the documents. His reading glasses made him look even more like Frank. "I know," I replied, hands trembling slightly. "But it's necessary." "Why now?" "You've had your name on their deed for 5 years. I hesitated. How could I explain that my own son and his wife had effectively banished me from their lives? "Things have shifted," I finally said. "I need to protect myself." James studied me over his glasses. "Frank would want me to look out for you, Ellie." The nickname brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Removing Rebecca's name while leaving Michael's is straightforward. "But are you sure?" "Yes," I said firmly. "I'm sure." As James prepared the paperwork, my mind drifted back through the years. Frank's death had been sudden, a heart attack at 45, 1 minute mowing the lawn, the next gone, leaving me a widow at 40 with a 10-year-old son. The first year was a blur of grief and practicalities. The life insurance helped, but wasn't enough long-term. I'd been a part-time bookkeeper, but now needed something substantial. I enrolled in an accelerated accounting program and took a second job waiting tables at night. My mother moved in temporarily to watch Michael. For 3 years, I barely slept. Office work, classes, then restaurant shifts until midnight. Weekends were for studying, housework, and trying to be present for Michael. "Why are you always gone?" he asked once, his face pinched with confusion. "I'm working to take care of us," I explained. "I just need you," he said simply. His words haunted me, fueling both determination and guilt. Eventually, I secured a better position and quit waitressing. By the time Michael was 14, our life had found a new rhythm. When college approached, I was ready. I had saved enough to cover most of his tuition, and what I couldn't, we borrowed. Michael graduated with honors and a job offer from a prestigious firm. I was so proud watching him walk across that stage. That night, I gave him his father's watch, the same one I'd brought to the brunch. Dad would want you to have this. I told him. He always said he'd give it to you when you became a man. Michael hugged me then. A real hug, tight and grateful. I couldn't have done this without you, Mom. That was the high point, before everything changed. He met Rebecca a year later. She was beautiful, ambitious, from a family with connections. Their whirlwind romance caught me by surprise. At their wedding, I found myself seated far from the main party. When I asked Rebecca's mother if I could be moved closer to my son, she patted my hand condescendingly. The parents' table is full. Eleanor, I'm sure you understand. I did understand. I was being relegated to the periphery. After the honeymoon, they found their dream home but couldn't compete with other buyers. It's perfect, Mom, Michael lamented. But our down payment isn't enough. I can help, I said without hesitation. Liquidated my investment account, money I'd saved for retirement, for travel, for art classes, and added enough to make their offer competitive. To avoid gift taxes, my name was added to the deed alongside theirs. You're the best, Mom, Michael had said. We'll pay you back. Rebecca smiled too, though her gratitude seemed reserved. Yes, thank you, Eleanor. This is very generous. That was 5 years ago. They never repaid me, not that I actively sought repayment. When Ethan was born a year later, I expected to be a hands-on grandmother. Instead, I found myself navigating Rebecca's endless restrictions. I could only visit at certain times. Gifts required prior approval. My offers to babysit were accepted only in emergencies, with extensive instructions, as if I hadn't raised a child of my own. Still, I persevered. I showed up. I respected their boundaries, even when they hurt. I kept believing things would change, but as years passed, I was invited to fewer events. My calls went unanswered. My presence seemed tolerated rather than welcomed. And now, here I was, changing a legal document because my daughter-in-law had finally said out loud what her actions had been declaring for years. I wasn't part of their family anymore. Eleanor? James's voice pulled me back. He held out a pen. I need your signature here. I took the pen, its weight suddenly significant. With each signature, I reclaimed a small piece of what I'd given away. Not just money, but dignity, self-respect. What happens now? I asked. I'll file these tomorrow. The change will be official within a few days. Rebecca's name will be removed, leaving just you and Michael as co-owners. And they won't be notified? Not by the county. They'll only find out if they check the property records. I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. This wasn't revenge. It was self-preservation. Frank would be proud of you, James said as he walked me to the door. He always said you were stronger than you knew. I smiled weakly. It's taken me 8 years to stand up for myself. Better late than never, Ellie, he replied. Better late than never. As I drove home, I felt lighter somehow. The hurt was still there, but alongside it was something new, a flicker of determination. While one chapter might be closing, another was beginning. I had always defined myself by my relationship to others, Frank's wife, Michael's mother, Ethan's grandmother. Perhaps it was time to discover who Eleanor Harrison was on her own terms. The week after my visit to James's office passed in a strange limbo. I kept expecting the phone to ring with an angry call from Michael or Rebecca, demanding to know why. I'd removed her name from the deed. But nothing happened. Life continued as if I hadn't taken that small, defiant step. Perhaps that was the most telling part. They hadn't even checked. The property that had been partly mine for 5 years wasn't important enough for them to monitor. On Wednesday morning, I woke early, made coffee, and carried it out to my garden. The roses Frank had planted 20 years ago were in full bloom, their scent filling the air. I sat on the wrought iron bench we'd found at a flea market, cradling my mug between my palms. What now, Frank? I whispered to the empty space beside. Me. For so long, my life had revolved around others, around being needed. First by Frank, then by Michael, briefly by Ethan until Rebecca limited my access. But now? No one was calling for my help, my time, my money. The silence was both terrifying and strangely liberating. I took a sip of coffee and watched a hummingbird dart between flowers. I couldn't remember the last time I'd simply sat and observed the world without feeling guilty for taking a moment for myself. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. Rebecca's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Eleanor," she said without preamble, "we need you to watch Ethan on Saturday. Michael and I have a dinner with his boss. No greeting. No how are you, just a demand." A week ago, I would have immediately rearranged any plans to accommodate them. I would have been pathetically grateful for the chance to spend time with my grandson. "I'm sorry, Rebecca," I heard myself say. "I have plans on Saturday." The silence on the other end was profound. "What plans?" she finally asked, disbelief evident in her tone. I straightened my spine. "I'm taking a painting class." Another silence. "A painting class," she repeated flatly. "You're choosing a painting class over your own grandson?" "I'm honoring a commitment I made to myself," I replied, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "I signed up for the class last week and paid in advance." "This dinner is really important for Michael's career," Rebecca pressed, her voice taking on that manipulative sweetness I knew all too well. "Surely you can reschedule a painting class." "I'm sorry, but no. Perhaps you could ask your mother?" "My mother is in Europe," she snapped, the sweetness evaporating. "You know that." I hadn't known that. They hadn't told me. "I see. Well, I'm sure you can find another solution. There are several good babysitting services in town." "I can't believe—" "You're being so selfish," Rebecca hissed. "After everything we've done for you." The irony was so stark I almost laughed. What exactly had they done for me aside from gradually excising me from their lives? "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said, calmly. "I have to go now. Good luck finding a sitter." I ended the call before she could respond, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I had never said no to them before, never prioritized myself. My phone immediately buzzed again. This time, it was Michael. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text appeared. "Mom, what's going on? Rebecca says you're refusing to help us with Ethan. This isn't like you," I typed back. "I already had plans. I'm sorry." His response was immediate. "Since when do you make plans that can't be changed?" "This dinner is really important." I stared at his words, seeing for the first time how he truly viewed me, as someone without a life of my own, someone who existed solely to serve their needs. I put the phone down without responding and went inside to get ready. I had a lunch date with Marianne, an old friend I hadn't seen in nearly a year. We'd lost touch when her invitations were repeatedly declined because Rebecca always seemed to need something those days. Yesterday, I'd called Marianne out of the blue, half expecting her to reject me after so many rebuffs. Instead, she'd sounded delighted. "Eleanor, I was just thinking about you. Are you free for lunch tomorrow? The new bistro on Maple is wonderful." As I dressed for lunch, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd put on makeup and nice clothes just for myself, not for a family obligation. The woman in the mirror looked different somehow, a little uncertain, but with a spark in her eyes that had been missing for too long. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Michael. "Mom, please. We really need you Saturday. What's going on?" "With you?" I turned the phone face down on my dresser. Whatever crisis they were having, they would have to solve it without me. It was time they learned I wasn't at their disposal anymore. At the bistro, Marianne waved from a corner table. Her face lit up when she saw me. "You look wonderful," she exclaimed, standing to embrace me. "That color is perfect on you." The compliment warmed me. When was the last time someone had noticed me, really seen me? Over salads and iced tea, we caught up on each other's lives. Marianne had retired from teaching last year and was now volunteering at an art museum. "You should join me," she said. "They're always looking for docents. You know so much about art history." "I don't know." I hesitated. "It's been so long since I've done anything like that." Marianne reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Eleanor, what happened to you? You used to love art. Remember our classes in college? You were brilliant." I shrugged, embarrassed. Life happened. Family. And now? The question hung between us, simple yet profound. "Now," I said slowly, "I think it's time to remember who I was before I was only someone's wife, mother, grandmother." Marianne smiled. "Well, that sounds like the Eleanor I remember." Saturday morning arrived with a crystalline clarity. I woke before my alarm, a flutter of anticipation in my stomach. Today was my first painting class, the first thing I'd done solely for myself in years. I dressed carefully in comfortable clothes that could withstand paint splatters, packed the supplies I'd purchased from the art store downtown, and made myself a proper breakfast. As I ate, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Michael, 2 from Rebecca, 2 from Rebecca, and a string of increasingly frustrated texts. "Mom, this is ridiculous. Call me back. We found a sitter, but now Ethan is upset because he wanted to see you. I don't understand why you're being so difficult." The last message had come at 11 p.m. "Fine, do whatever you want, but don't expect us to rearrange our lives when you suddenly decide you want to see Ethan." I placed the phone face down on the table. The guilt was there, tugging at me, but alongside it was something stronger, a certainty that I was doing the right thing. They were using Ethan as a weapon, trying to manipulate me back into my assigned role. I wouldn't let them. The art studio was housed in an old converted warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and soaring windows that let in floods of natural light. About a dozen other students were already setting up their easels when I arrived, most of them women around my age or older. "First time?" asked a silver-haired woman at the easel next to mine, noticing my hesitation. "That obvious, huh?" I smiled, arranging my brushes. "We were all new once," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Dorothy." "Eleanor," I replied, shaking her hand. "I haven't painted since college. I'm a bit nervous." "Don't be. Caroline is a wonderful teacher. Just enjoy the process." Caroline turned out to be a vibrant woman in her 40s, who began the class by telling us to forget everything we thought we knew about good art. "We're here to express, not impress," she announced. "Today, we're going to focus on color and emotion. I want you to paint how you feel, not what you see." She dimmed the lights, put on soft instrumental music, and instructed us to close our eyes, breathe deeply, and let an emotion surface. "Now choose colors that express that feeling," she said. "Don't overthink it." I stared at my blank canvas, brush poised. What was I feeling? The obvious answers came first: hurt, rejection, loneliness. But beneath those, something else stirred. Something that felt like possibility. I selected a deep blue and began to paint broad, sweeping strokes across the canvas. Then purple, then a surprising splash of bright yellow. I lost track of time, lost in the pure sensory pleasure of color and movement. "Beautiful energy," Caroline said, pausing behind me. "There's real emotion here." By the end of the class, my canvas was a storm of color, chaotic but vibrant, dark but shot through with light. Looking at it, I felt a strange sense of recognition. This was me, messy, complicated, in transition. "Same time next week?" Dorothy asked as we cleaned our brushes. "Absolutely," I replied without hesitation. "A few of us usually grab lunch after. You're welcome to join." The invitation warmed me. I'd like that. When I arrived home, there was a voicemail from Michael. "Mom, I don't know what's going on with you, but we need to talk. Ethan keeps asking why Grandma doesn't want to see him anymore. Call me back." The emotional blackmail was obvious but still effective. My heart ached at the thought of Ethan believing I didn't want to see him. I dialed Michael's number. "Finally," he answered, irritation evident in his voice. "Where have you been?" "I had my painting class and then lunch," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Painting class," he repeated dismissively. "Since when do you paint?" "Since college, actually. I'm starting again." "Whatever. Look, Ethan is really upset. He thinks you're mad at him." "I'm not mad at anyone, Michael. I just had prior plans." "Well, he doesn't understand that. Can you come over tomorrow? Rebecca's taking her yoga class at 10, so it would just be you and Ethan. And me, of course." The invitation was clearly strategic. Rebecca absent. Just my son and grandson. The perfect bait. "I'd love to see Ethan," I said carefully. "But I have plans tomorrow morning, too. I could come by around 1 after Rebecca's back." Silence, then a sigh. "What plans? Church?" "No, I'm having brunch with Marianne. Remember her? My friend from college?" "Mom, I don't understand what's happening here. First you refuse to help us when we need you. Now you're suddenly too busy to see your grandson. Are you punishing us for something?" I took a deep breath. "I'm not punishing anyone, Michael. I'm just living my life." "Your life," he echoed, flatly. "And where exactly do we fit into this new life of yours? It was a fair question, one I'd been asking myself. I will always make time for you and Ethan, I said honestly, but I'm not available on demand anymore. I need some advance notice, some consideration. This is about the brunch, isn't it? Rebecca was just joking about you not being part of the family. You're taking this way too seriously. So that was their interpretation, that I was having some sort of petty reaction to a harmless joke. How convenient for them to frame it that way, rather than acknowledge years of gradual exclusion. This isn't about any one incident, I said. It's about patterns. It's about respect. Respect. Michael's voice rose. We've always respected you, Mom. We let you be part of our lives, part of Ethan's life. Let me, as if it were a privilege they bestowed, not a natural right as Ethan's grandmother. I need to go, Michael. I'll call to arrange a time to see Ethan next week. Mom. I ended the call, my hand trembling slightly. Standing up to Michael was harder than refusing Rebecca. He was my son, my only child. The instinct to placate him, to maintain peace at any cost, was deeply ingrained. But I couldn't. Go back to the way things were. I wouldn't. Over the next few weeks, I established a new routine: painting class on Saturdays, followed by lunch with my new friends, brunch with Marianne on Sundays, volunteer shifts at the art museum on Tuesdays and Thursdays, book club on Wednesday. Evenings. My calendar, once empty except for family obligations I was expected to fulfill, was now filled with activities I chose. People who seemed genuinely happy to see me. I still saw Ethan, but on my terms. Scheduled visits where I picked him up for ice cream or a trip to the park. Rebecca was coldly civil during these exchanges. Michael increasingly bewildered by my continued independence. I hardly recognize you anymore, he said during one handoff. You're so different. I smiled, taking Ethan's small hand in mine. I'm not different, Michael. I'm just more myself. As I walked away with my grandson, I felt Michael's gaze on my back. Confused, perhaps a little hurt, but I couldn't turn back. Not anymore. The path forward was finally becoming clear. 3 months into my new life, I barely recognized my old routine. My days were full, purposeful. I'd graduated from basic painting classes to a more advanced studio session, shy. Volunteer work at the museum had expanded to include leading tours for school groups. I'd reconnected with old friends and made new ones. More importantly, I'd rediscovered parts of myself long buried under the weight of others' expectations. My love for art, my dry sense of humor, my quiet confidence. The only shadow was the continued tension with Michael and Rebecca. Our interactions remained strained, a cold war of passive-aggressive texts and tightly controlled visits with Ethan. I missed the easy relationship I'd once had with my son, before Rebecca, before I'd started standing up for myself. On a crisp October morning, I was having coffee on my porch when my phone rang. It was Michael, calling at 7:30 a.m. on a Tuesday, unusual enough to make me answer immediately. Michael? Is everything okay? Mom? He sounded rushed, agitated. I need a huge favor. Rebecca's mother fell and broke her hip. She's flying to Phoenix today to help. Ethan has that stomach bug that's going around school, so he can't go to class. I have a presentation I absolutely cannot miss. Can you please come watch him? Just, for today? I hesitated. This was clearly an actual emergency, not another attempt to pull me back into their orbit. And Ethan was sick. Of course, I said. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Thank you, Michael exhaled with relief. You're a lifesaver. I arrived at their house, the house I'd helped them buy, with homemade chicken soup and ginger tea for Ethan. Michael met me at the door, briefcase in hand, already dressed for his presentation. He's in his room. Fever's down to 99.8, he said, kissing my cheek distractedly. Medicine's on the counter. He's due for more at noon. Rebecca said to make sure he drinks plenty of fluids. I know how to care for a sick child, Michael, I reminded him gently. He paused, looking at me properly for the first time. Right, sorry. It's just, this presentation is huge, and with Rebecca gone. Go, I said. We'll be fine. Good luck today. After he left, I went up to Ethan's room. My grandson was curled under his dinosaur comforter, face flushed, but his eyes brightened when he saw me. Grandma, are you staying with me today? All day, I confirmed, sitting on the edge of his bed. I brought soup for later when your tummy feels better. The good soup? With the stars? His face lit up. Stelline pasta? Yes. I smiled, touched that he remembered. I used to make the same soup for Michael when he was sick. Awesome, he whispered, then closed his eyes again, clearly tired. Rest now, I said, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. I'll be right downstairs if you need anything. While Ethan slept, I straightened the kitchen, started a load of laundry, and made myself comfortable in the living room with a book. Around 10, I heard Ethan calling weakly. Grandma, can I have some water? I brought him water and checked his temperature, still the same, not concerning. He drank greedily, then looked at me with those serious eyes, so like Michael's at that age. Mom and Dad were fighting about you, he said suddenly. I kept my expression neutral. Oh? What about? Dad said Mom was mean to you at brunch. Mom said she was just joking. She was just joking. But Dad said it wasn't funny. I sat carefully on the edge of his bed. When was this? After you stopped coming over all the time? Dad was really mad, so Michael had confronted Rebecca about her comment. I hadn't known that. Well, sometimes grown-ups disagree, I said neutrally. Mom said you were being dramatic, Ethan continued, unaware of the impact of his words. But Dad said she was the one who pushed you away first. I took a slow breath. Ethan, honey, you don't need to worry about adult problems. But I miss you, he said simply. You used to come over all the time. I miss you too, I said honestly. That's why I take you for ice cream and to the park. It's not the same. He mumbled, eyes drooping. I like when you're here. My heart constricted. I like being here with you too. He fell back asleep, and I sat watching him, conflicted. I didn't want my issues with his parents to affect him, but they clearly were. Children always know when something is wrong, even when adults think they're hiding it. Around noon, I heard the front door open, too early for Michael to be home. Rebecca appeared in the doorway of Ethan's room, her expression tight with surprise and displeasure. Eleanor, I didn't expect to see you here, Michael called. Ethan's sick and he had an important presentation. My flight was canceled, she explained stiffly. Construction issues at the airport. They can't reschedule until tomorrow. How fortunate, I said mildly. Ethan will be glad to have you home. She glanced at her sleeping son, then back at me. I can take it from here. I nodded and stood. There was no point in arguing, no reason to stay now that she was home. I'd call Michael later to let him know. As I gathered my things downstairs, Rebecca followed me, hovering as if making sure I was actually leaving. I need a document for the insurance, she said suddenly. For my mother's medical costs. Michael said you might have it in your files. What document? I asked, confused. The property deed, she said. For this house. I need to prove assets for her care. I froze, my hand on my purse. This was it. The moment I'd been both dreading and expecting for months. The deed, I repeated. And why would you need that specifically? Rebecca gave me a look of thinly veiled impatience. Because the house is our largest asset. I'm trying to get Mom into a better facility, and they want financial information. I nodded slowly. I see. Well, I don't have the deed with me, but you can check the county records. They should have the current version on file. Current version? Her eyes narrowed slightly. Why would there be different versions? I met her gaze steadily. Property records change. People's names are added, removed. It's all public record. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. What are you talking about? Why don't you check the records, Rebecca? I think you'll find them. Informative. She stared at me, comprehension slowly dawning. You did something to the deed, she said flatly. What did you do? I protected my investment, I replied calmly. That's all. Rebecca's face flushed. This is our house. Michael and I own it. Actually, I corrected gently, Michael and I own it. Your name was removed from the deed 3 months ago. Her mouth opened, then closed. Shock, then fury flashed across her face. You had no right. I had every right, I interrupted, my voice still calm but firm. My name was on that deed. I contributed substantially to the purchase of this house. I simply adjusted the ownership to reflect the current reality of our relationship. Which is what, exactly? She hissed. You said it yourself at brunch. I reminded her. I'm not part of this family anymore. Those were your words, Rebecca. I just took them to their logical conclusion. She was speechless, color draining from her face. "Don't worry," I continued, picking up my purse. "I have no intention of exercising my rights as co-owner. As long as Michael remains on the deed, I won't interfere. Consider it his inheritance early." "Michael doesn't know about this, does he?" she finally managed. "I assume not," I replied. "But I've never hidden it. The information is public." "He'll be furious," she said, but I detected a note of uncertainty in her voice. "Perhaps," I acknowledged. "Or perhaps he'll understand why I felt it necessary." I moved toward the door, then paused. "Tell Ethan I hope he feels better soon. The soup is in the refrigerator. Just heat it gently. He likes crackers crumbled on top." Rebecca didn't respond, just stood frozen in the entryway as I walked to my car. As I drove away, I saw her in my rearview mirror, still standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. The confrontation I'd been anticipating for months had finally happened. Not on my terms, not how I'd planned, but it was done. The truth was out. Now I just had to wait for the fallout. I expected Michael's call within the hour. When my phone remained silent all afternoon, the anticipation turned to anxiety, then to a strange, calm resignation. Whatever happened next, I had stood my ground. I couldn't regret that. By evening, I'd settled into my new normal, a glass of wine, a good book, classical music playing softly in the background. The woman I was becoming found comfort in these simple pleasures, these quiet moments of solitude that the old Eleanor would have filled with worry and guilt. When the doorbell rang at 8:30 p.m., I knew exactly who it was. Michael stood on my porch, hands shoved in his pockets, face drawn with exhaustion and confusion. No anger, surprisingly, just bewilderment. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside, gesturing toward the living room. He walked past me, then stopped, noticing the changes I'd made over the past few months. The walls repainted in a warm terracotta, my own paintings hanging where family photos had once dominated, the new bookshelves filled with art books and novels. "You've been busy," he commented, turning slowly. "Sit down, Michael," I said gently. "Would you like some tea? Or something stronger?" "Stronger," he replied, sinking onto the couch. I poured him a whiskey, Frank's favorite, which I'd kept all these years, and handed it to him, then sat in the armchair across from him waiting. He took a long sip, then met my eyes. "Rebecca told me what you did." I nodded. I thought she might. "Why didn't you tell me yourself?" It was a fair question. "I wasn't hiding it," I said carefully, "but I wasn't ready to have that conversation yet. 3 months, Mom. You changed. Our house deed 3 months ago and said nothing." "Your house deed," I corrected. "And yes, I removed Rebecca's name, not yours." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father's that it made my heart ache. Why? Such a simple question with such a complicated answer. I took a breath, choosing my words with care. "That day at brunch, when Rebecca said I wasn't part of the family anymore, and you laughed, I didn't—" He started to protest, then stopped. "I'm sorry about that. I should have said something." "Yes, you should have," I agreed. "But it wasn't just that moment, Michael. It was years of little moments. Being seated at the far table at your wedding, being given a list of rules for when I could see Ethan, being expected to drop everything whenever you needed me, but never being included in the good times." He looked down at his glass. "I didn't realize it was that bad." "Of course you didn't. You weren't meant to. Rebecca has been pushing me to the margins for years, so gradually that it seemed natural by the time she finally said the words out loud." "But the deed? Why take such a drastic step?" "Because it was the only power I had left," I said simply. "I helped you buy that house. I put my retirement savings into it, and I realized that if I truly wasn't family anymore, I needed to protect myself." Michael was quiet for a long moment. "Rebecca is furious," he finally said. "She wants me to demand you change it back." "And what do you want?" I asked. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. Perhaps no one had asked him that question in a very long time. "I don't know," he admitted. "This whole situation is so messed up. I feel caught in the middle." "You are in the middle," I acknowledged. "But Michael, I need you to understand something. I didn't do this to hurt you, or even to hurt Rebecca. I did it for me, to reclaim some small piece of what I've given away over the years. Ethan said you told him you missed coming to our house, Michael said suddenly. Is that true? Of course it's true. I miss being a regular part of his life. I miss the relationship we used to have before. Before Rebecca, he finished. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Michael set his glass down, leaning forward. Mom, be honest with me. Has Rebecca really been that bad to you? Because from my perspective, you've always seemed, I don't know, resigned, like you were fine with how things were. I learned to hide my hurt, I said quietly. What good would it have done to complain? You were happy. You had your new family. I didn't want to be the bitter old mother-in-law, the clingy widow who couldn't let her son go. So you just endured it for years? Until I couldn't anymore. Until I realized that enduring it was destroying me. He was silent again, digesting this. Then, Rebecca says if you don't put her name back on the deed, she wants us to sell the house. I wasn't surprised. That's between you and her. My name stays on the deed with yours. What you two decide to do with your marriage, your home, that's not my concern. Not your concern? He looked genuinely shocked. Mom, this is my life we're talking about. Yes, it is. Your life, not mine. I leaned forward, matching his posture. Michael, I love you. I always will. But I'm done sacrificing. My happiness, my identity, my very self for you or anyone else. For you or anyone else. So that's it? You've just moved on? Not from you, I clarified. Never from you. But from the role I was playing, yes. I'm not just your mother or Frank's widow or Ethan's grandmother. I'm Eleanor Harrison, a woman with her own life, her own needs, her own value. I never thought you weren't valuable, he protested. Didn't you? I asked gently. When was the last time you called just to talk, not because you needed something? When was the last time you asked about my day, my interests, my feelings? He had no answer. I'm not blaming you entirely, I continued. I allowed it. I played my part, but now I'm choosing a different role. Michael stood abruptly, pacing to the window and back. I don't know how to fix this. Maybe it's not yours to fix, I suggested. Maybe it's just yours to accept. He stopped, looking at me as if seeing me clearly for the first time in years. You've really changed. I've really remembered, I corrected. The woman I was before I forgot how to be her. He nodded slowly, then reached for his jacket. I should go. Rebecca is waiting. Of course. I walked him to the door, uncertain if this fragile new understanding between us would last beyond tonight. At the threshold, he turned. Mom, He hesitated, then pulled me into a brief, awkward hug. I'm sorry for not seeing what was happening. I know, I said, returning the hug. I love you, Michael. That hasn't changed. I love you too, he replied. And for the first time in years, I felt he might actually mean it. After he left, I returned to my book, my wine, my music. But my mind kept circling back to our conversation. Had anything really been resolved? Wasn't sure, but something had shifted. Some small crack had appeared in the wall between us. The next morning, I met Dorothy and the other women from my painting class for our regular coffee. I shared an abbreviated version of the previous night's events. So he finally knows, Dorothy said. How do you feel? I considered the question. Lighter, I decided. Whatever happens next, the secret is out. I don't have to carry it anymore. And what do you think will happen next? Asked Judith, the retired English professor who had become a dear friend. I don't know, I admitted. But for the first time in a very long time, I'm not afraid to find out. 2 weeks passed. Michael called twice. Brief, slightly stilted conversations, but calls nonetheless. No mention of the deed, of Rebecca, of the future of their house. Just my son, reaching out, perhaps trying to find his way back to me. Then, on a sunny Tuesday afternoon, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Ethan, backpack in hand, and Michael standing behind him. Surprise visit? Michael said, his smile tentative. Ethan has a half day at school, and I took the afternoon off. We thought maybe you'd like to show us some of your paintings. Ethan's been asking about them. Can I see them, Grandma? Ethan bounced on his toes, excitement radiating from him. Dad says you're really good. I looked at Michael, questioning. He shrugged, a small, genuine smile playing at his lips. I saw the one in your living room. It's beautiful, Mom. Come. In, I said, opening the door wider, something warm and hopeful blooming in my chest. I'd love to show you. As I led them into my studio, formerly the guest room, now transformed with easels and canvases and the scent of paint, I realized that this was what liberation truly felt like. Not the absence of family, but the presence of authentic connection. Not the severing of bonds, but the renegotiation of their terms. I didn't know if Rebecca would ever accept the new boundaries, the new me. I didn't know if the deed would remain a point of contention or fade into the background of our complicated family history. I didn't know if Michael and I would ever fully rebuild what had been broken, but as I watched my grandson's eyes widen, at the sight of my paintings, as I saw my son looking at me with something like respect, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was Eleanor Harrison, and I was exactly where I was meant to be.